Hi, this is the FREN Productions podcast, and we're here in Philmont, New York, at our gallery, and we have our first guest, Reed Anderson. He is exhibiting his current body of work called the Papa Object. So Reed, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right.
Beautiful.
And I want to appreciate you inviting me to come on to the first podcast. And I really appreciate being the first exhibit at FREN Productions here in Philmont.
Beautiful. And thank you so much. Your work has been awesome. People have loved it, and we're happy to have you in Philmont.
Cool.
And so let's start talking about Papa Object. Can you describe the Papa Object framed work and the installation at FREN Productions to those who are only listening to the podcast?
I can. It's they are the work that is in frames is colorful work that has taken objects from antique and home and ethnic auction catalogs, say from Christie's and Sotheby's, and they have blown them up in a way to be large posters. And then I paint and block print on top of the object. And the best way I can describe it as aesthetically would be somewhere between a grocery store paste up artist making a sign for fresh tomatoes, where it's got big bold colors and a swath of blue and red and words written into it. And some cross between that and a punk rock electroclash flyer and samizdat pamphlets, which were a way that contraband, usually literature, was distributed in Eastern Europe, and it was made into little pamphlets that were typed on typewriters and were often done as cheaply as possible. And there is a very raw quality to all of these paintings that is important to me.
So what's the size of the pieces usually?
Yeah, it's about they're about 4 feet by 3 feet. And I have done I have taken a roll of many of the black and white images that I've blown up to be large, 4 foot by 3 foot size, and I have made multiples of all of these different objects, from chandeliers to African masks to candle to chairs and dumbwaiters. And I've plastered the entire wall beneath the framed work. That is to say, there's a wallpaper that's black and white full of objects, and then the colorful framed work is hung on top of that.
So that's the description of the installation for those listening. And can you, just one last question about this subject. Can you describe the quality of the paper and the way the paint sits on it?
Yeah, I could. I usually work on many of these at the same time. I like to work quickly. I don't like to spend a lot of time on these. That is because the other artwork that I make is very labor and time consuming. And one of the pleasures of making this work is there's an immediacy and a quality to the paint and creation that I want to be tactile and accepting of all mistakes. So sometimes I'm walking on them and I'm squishing paint in a very haphazard way and not looking for really making a pretty picture, although some of them have qualities that are very beautiful. But it's really about trying to find something new in the object. And so sometimes there are creases, there are folds, there are footprints, and that would be, and I don't spend a lot of time making the initial poster of the object, so it's just done in halftone dots, and sometimes that blurs while I'm painting, and it's all just part of the process.
So the halftone dots, those come after you Xerox the objects from the catalogs that you use?
So all of these things come from these, and to those people listening, here's a Bonham's catalog I've got here, and you know, it's these catalogs full of these fantastic antiques, objects, and the way the photographs are shot are so appealing. And so I just use my iPhone and I photograph the object, and in Photoshop quickly turn it into a halftone PDF at scale, and then print it out on a large toner plotter.
Awesome. And then when these objects get scanned and then printed, they become rasterized, and they are in black and white. And then as Reed begins to add paint, they start to grow out of their, maybe, would you say, cold experience inside the catalog book?
I don't think that there's anything cold about the photographs in the auction catalog. What I like about the auction catalog is that it's so full of the way the photographs are. They are so perfect that it's kind of this ultimate advertising and objectification of consumer culture on a very high level. Although auction catalogs exist, you know, we can bring this down to eBay, which is very pedestrian, but I'm interested in where this fine line is between people purchasing a lifestyle and how that and art, how these things affect one another.
So when you talk about purchasing a lifestyle and some of the other concepts in the work, how do the titles play in there? Because I do see them as this, the titles are very unique, they're very playful, and they somewhat draw a personal experience to the artwork. One is called Waiter, Waiter, and it makes you wonder what the artist was going through when he finalized the piece, maybe. Can you talk, or maybe I'm wrong, can you talk about the titles of the work?
Yeah, I really, I keep a list of titles, and I have a long list of titles in many books. I have some books that are only titles, and when I finish a piece, I usually start searching around for titles that seem appropriate. But they're not narrative, and they're not meant to be descriptive necessarily of the piece. I think Waiter, Waiter is a dumb waiter, or a table that's meant as a dumb waiter. So I've always thought that idea of a dumb waiter was as a kid, I thought that was a really funny word. But no, I think that the titles, yeah. They just
so you kind of collage them like paint.
Exactly. It's it's collage like paint and poetry.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So you have that's a really cool process. You write them down as if when they pop in, and then as you go, you just
And sometimes the title. I'll think, oh wow, this is a title that has to be, the title's coming while I'm working on a piece. One of the pieces is something, is clearly a totem. The word totem came to me, and I was thinking, okay, well, let's think about totem while I'm making the piece. But rarely do I want that kind of interference. It's to me, the title usually has nothing to do with the piece. It's a separate piece of poetry. I don't want to describe anything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So this leads to the next question. How did this body of work come to fruition? How has the concept developed, and how do you see it continuing to grow?
Okay. So this body of work started a few years after my father died, and I found myself in the midst of taking care of many objects and paintings and things, and it was overwhelming. And I was overwhelmed by this idea of all of the things. And then I was moving, and I had to take care of all of my own paintings. And all of this stuff I was just like, oh my God, it's just objects. I don't know, things. And and during that time, I was moving. I had a lot of these auction catalogs. Both my father and my grandmother were in the art world, and I had a lot of these antique auction catalogs around. And you see them being sold on the street in New York. And I had collected them because I loved the photographs in them. And I began to think about objects. And so, so I started this process of, taking these objects out of these catalogs, objects that I really liked. And I thought, okay, I want that object. I would like to buy that object, but I can't afford it. That's really cool. I like the shape of that. It was a way of asserting some ownership maybe over something. And I would make these pieces. And when they first started, to me, they were very weird. I didn't really know what I was making. I wasn't really making it. It was making me. And I kept making them, and they evolved or something. I thought, I really just want to see how gritty and dirty and crummy and weird these can get. And after I had about 50 of them, because I would just put them into a flat file when I was done with each one. After I had about 50 of them, I showed them to some friends, and they were like, wow, you got a lot of this work, And it was like, what are you going to do with it? And it didn't look like any other work that I had. And I remember taking one of the pieces back to my apartment, and I would pin it up on the wall. Sometimes I would do that while I was working on them. And I'd take a photograph of it. So I was like, okay, like, what's it look like if I live with it? And then I was laughing because I was like, oh, I'm just taking a photograph. Now it's just an object again because I've photographed it. Like, it's like a photograph of an object, of a photograph of an object, like a feedback loop. And so that became very interesting to me, the idea of like, okay, well, how do we live with art? And then I began to think about my own history with my grandmother and my father being art dealers and all of the art in the world. And maybe to relieve some of the guilt for making objects, I thought, okay, well, what's a project that would be engaging and interesting that would involve other people? So I created a mail art project. At the time, that was a lot of people were sending, a lot of my friends and we were sending postcards and all sorts of crazy things through the mail. And I took about, I probably 25. I began collecting addresses from people, mostly who I did not know. It would be like my saying, Jesus, do you know anybody in Berlin? And you'd say, yeah, I know this person in Berlin. And I said, wow, do you think they'd do this thing? So I started collecting all these addresses of people around the world. And maybe this is getting to be a long story. But and then I wrapped up 25 of them. And then, so I didn't know what piece would go where. And they would come with white gloves for tax. And the piece would get FedExed or sent USPS, and the person was meant to put it up on their wall in their house, live with it for 30 days or 60 days, and take a photograph of it at some point in their house with all their other stuff, and then send it back to me. And I racked up quite a FedEx account at the time, and it was incredible. And then I did the other 25, and I started to get these images back from places that people let me into their home. I was so grateful. And they would take photographs with whatever camera they had. Nothing really was that staged. It was, and so you would have somebody sitting in their Manchester bedroom, a teenager. Somebody took a picture of their teenager with a Justin Bieber poster on the wall, and then my art piece next to it. And they're just in their room doing homework. And some people, there was an Antarctic research vessel that got sent to, and the mailroom stamped the poster or my artwork with the mailroom stamp for the vessel. There
exists a book about this project.
Well, there is a concept book. I am currently looking to publish, and it shows all of the pieces with the photograph and then the piece next to it. So this would be Portland, Oregon.
So it's a photograph of the work,
Yes.
and then quite an intimate, gritty, or some people will do a nice digital photograph. Maybe somebody will take.
Yeah, this is in Iceland.
film.
This is in Iceland, and there's a polar bear skin on the wall. There's, this is in Massignaux, France, and so you have these very intimate portraits, and here's the research vessel.
Oh, beautiful.
And
Look
with
at
the
that photograph.
with the porthole right above it, and there it is, and here it is with this stamp on it. And so I have this book that I am, I need to fund publishing, or if somebody is out there that would like to help me get this going. There's a great couple essays in here by the writer Emily Hall, and she wrote an essay for my very first show of these in the Canary Islands in Galleria Leyendecker, and that show was called Our New Lifestyle. And I had started this mail art project, but Leyendecker asked me to do an exhibition, and so I did an exhibition of them. It felt very strange to do both the mail art project, which felt like it had its own legs, but then to show them as artwork.
Well, it talks about the feedback that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think that was the cool thing, is you would get the piece back, and then it would be, you'd say like, whoa, look, there's this photograph of my artwork, which is made from a photograph in a catalog of some other artwork, or usually object. Mm-hmm. So I think that to me was fascinating. And then to return it to a book that would be a catalog size, an auction catalog size book. There's a lot of humor in it, but there's also some seriousness about the state of art and capitalism and this kind of art world that, a capitalist art world that is running amok.
Right, because you're taking an image of an object to be sold, and you're far, far, far removing it, way even beyond just the art piece itself, by mailing it, by photographing it.
Yeah.
And this is a further installation of that project, in which you inundate the viewer with the scans of multiple objects, and then also with the colors that you use by painting the walls. And then on top of that, we have the actual pieces who have traveled all over the world.
Yes. Yeah.
So basically a little synopsis of that is that you had this personal relationship to these catalogs that held a significance or some sort of emotional significant value from the life you had with your father, and maybe the death of your father, and I'm sorry about that loss, that which then turned into an emotional outpour where you made 50 of these things, and then eventually you began to have these concepts pop up about the art world and the art market, and it
was a way to engage with things that I had a lot of conflict around, and there are and complexes around when you're an artist and you're making things. Ultimately, you would like that thing to have a home, and somebody buys that thing, and then ultimately, I'm going to die, and whoever bought that thing is going to die, and then what's going to happen to it? Well, as artists, we think, oh, well, it's going to live forever, but oftentimes it ends up not living. It may continue living forever, but it's an object that somebody needs to deal with. Are people going to get it? I don't know. And so I want to disassociate myself a little bit from that, but this is a way in which I can engage with that interest, that curiosity about, like, well, what is it? I'm making, and where is it going? And and a lot of the ones that were out in the world came back to me, and then I've just kept the project going because I enjoy making the paintings. I'm still interested in them, and I work on them in small spurts in between other work that I'm working on. And I've started to incorporate, occasionally I see things like, a bunch of crappy furniture on the sidewalk, and I'll take a photograph of it, and I'll, kind of cut out the background and remove the background and make an object out of it, and then use that for a poster, make one of these paintings, right? And then, Papa Object is really the name of the mail art part of this.
Okay.
And so now I'm these are kind of object posters, or they're they're paintings. They're definitely a part of the larger Papa Object, but Papa Object was the name I came up with for the mail art part of it. But as I look at these, this one right here, that's a stool that I own. So now I've started walking around my house and think, if I'm, grab a couple objects from my house, and it changes my relationship to the object.
Well, what's interesting about the title Papa Object, it makes you wonder what's more valuable, Papa or the object, right? And when we talk about these objects as marketed objects, as objects to be sold, we can get to topics like alienation.
Well, and hierarchy,
at what point does an object make us feel unnatural, or like it is getting in the way of what's most important, which is a human experience,
human connection. Yeah. Well, so I think that also Papa Object implies first of all, I like the way the name sounds. For me, it's very important that titles and words, they have that there's some aspect of it which feels good in your mouth to say, and that, and then I think Papa Object also implies a hierarchy that is within the catalogs. It's an implied male-dominated capitalist world of objects. And I think that is. And
you've played with the word male.
Mail art. I know. Well, I always now when I
object.
Yeah. No. Now when I say mail art, I have to say. I always go like, oh, MAIL, because I want to be clear, because I don't think people are sending us many things through the mail these days.
Okay. Well, I think this is leading us to the next question, which is, can you talk about the value in an art object and a non-art object in the market?
Can you say that again?
Yeah, and I can also give you some context for the question. So your work is pulling objects out of a market and making them art objects. There's a sort of a big question in the art world of what is art that goes as far back as anyone, right? Now we are facing AI. We have design that's more favorable to a unique painting or a piece of artwork. And it's a question that here at FREN Productions we also are consistently engaging it, because we want to sell art, but we also want to provide whoever is buying the art with a necessity.
Well, I think that is, I would love it if all of these paintings sold, and, they are players in a marketplace that they are both player and commentator, critique in. Mm-hmm. And so there is a part of that I'm participating in this, marketplace. I can't say if they're important. I don't know if, there is a innate satisfaction I get from making them. It satisfies some aspect of my own personal curiosity and my desire to make things in the world that are coming from a place of my unconscious, bringing them into the conscious. But once they're finished, I don't know. It's not for me to say. And what's important or what's not important, I think that is very much left to the public. And there are things that I like and things that I don't like in artwork. For example, I think the best kind of artwork asks questions. And I think that is where AI and design veer off. And I don't want to group AI and design in the same, because I think they're very different. But I think with the proliferation of art school, what you have is a system of education training people to give answers because they're teaching a skill. However, the promise of art school is that somehow you're going to be able to, quote unquote, make it, right? And I think that this is speaking broadly, but I do think that art schools are training people more to give art that gives answers, and I'm much more interested in an art that asks questions.
Okay.
Because that's what makes it alive.
Right. And I was reflecting on what you said about you liking to make art, because I know also that lots of artists go through a time where they don't like making it, but they gotta go into the studio.
Well, when I first started this project, I thought, this is total shit, the worst. And so for me, when I started it, I would try to make, one a day. And because I wanted that very quick quality to it, and it was something
you're a printmaker.
I studied printmaking. Yeah, that was what I got my degree in. And so there was this aspect of it felt like painting, felt like printing. It felt the whole thing felt good and right. But I in terms of the materials, the product, I had no idea what it was. And so for me, that was a very difficult thing to continue to make. What I enjoyed about it was the immediacy, the painterly quality, all of the things that were not a part of a practice that had become, quote unquote, my professional, what I was showing in galleries at the time. Okay. And it wasn't like I didn't enjoy that, but this scratched an itch that I had. And so I was less concerned about what the final product looked like.
Okay, you got it. But so that when an artist is engaging in this doubt, in this fear, in this joy, in this pain, and then they're creating this single object maybe, right, amongst many, but this one is one in where an artist of a trade, maybe who has gone to school, is presenting an object with this spirit, maybe, or it's attached to a personal experience that maybe you won't get out of a pair of shoes or a television.
But there's also.
So when you talk about.
Well, wait. I want to interrupt because I'm interested in what you're saying, because yes, I think that art can. I think that art is probably more important than a pair of shoes. I mean, it's certain, right? I think art. I'm very old-fashioned that way. I think art can, save. I think art can save someone's life. I think that, I'm very suspect of anybody's house I go into, and if there's no art on the wall.
Right,
And
because there's something that the person is engaging in that you know is like a lifetime of thought.
I don't know. I mean, if
something
there's
is-
no art in somebody's house and I'm in their house, I feel very suspicious of what's going on in that person's life, because I find art being so important in terms of a nourishment, a fertilizer, a soul to living, and that is very different than a lifestyle, and so. But one of the things that I think is very funny.
Lifestyle meaning the decoration around the home.
Yes,
versus the
exactly.
art
I mean,
piece.
and
Yes.
you know, I think people look at these auction catalogs and they can curate a lifestyle. And that idea of curating now, thanks to, you know, social platforms like Instagram and TikTok, the word curation and curate has taken on this really, you know, terrible idea where everything is curated, and I don't like that. It's commodifying something that is has soul, has something deeper.
Right. Well, a curator is not just anybody. This is a person who has personal creative taste, and that people
But I
seek
think
out.
anybody can be a curator. So this is where it's difficult for me, because I wouldn't say, oh well, only this elite person who has this education can be a curator. I think anybody should be able to be a curator. It's when we get down to like commodifying things through that curation, and we are creating quote unquote lifestyle magazines or mood boards from our life. Mm-hmm. We are more than a mood board. My God, I find that to be very disheartening. And these paintings engage with that and play with that idea. So these paintings are taken from these catalogs. I am playing with these things. I am intentionally overhanging them. I occasionally think of them like these adult like adult Pokemon cards, where it's like I wanted to make a show once called "For Collectors Only." It's a very glib, but it's the idea that one of these looks great, but they look great together. So and they're all the same size, and they all have this colorful thing, So I'm playing with something there that I'm also commenting on. I mean, that is the main message in these pieces.
Awesome. Yeah. I wanted to comment on what you were saying of people having artworks in their homes. And I feel that sometimes when we talk about the art market, it doesn't allow for artworks to enter people's home very often.
But the art market is a human-made system. I
Well,
mean, the art world.
One of the art markets, let's say there's one that's very established and working, and let's say there's one that's just asleep right now.
But I think that
Right.
there is an art market for every artist. But let's not forget the two words you're using: art and market. A marketplace does not make art.
Right.
So I think that there is, and so you could say art world, but these are fabricated systems of commercialization of creativity. Mm-hmm. And I think that there is an art world for every artist. I think that's one of the hard things for some people to adjust to, is when they come out of school, they're trying to figure out, well, what world am I a part of? And another way to think about this is, what art community? Because art has more to do with human connection and human community than it does a marketplace. Mm. Marketplace may be a part of that community, but I don't think that there is any artwork that is completely banned from or not accepted within its community.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that, and but I do think that your work talks a little bit about somewhat a struggle of the artist in a sense, because you're talking about art in a world full of objects, right? Aside from community and aside from what you say, maybe a market, I think that we face many, many challenges as artists because we have to compromise a lot of the themes, a lot of the materials we want to use, because the market is not being catered to maybe up-and-coming artists or artists who are not in a system. You know, what that does to a market is sometimes we flood the market with crappy art when there's no
But what is crappy art?
Crappy art is maybe where the artist feels like they're bogged down in their studio and they can't really talk about some of the things that they want to do, or maybe they're afraid to talk about a subject because the buyers just won't sell and won't buy that subject. Maybe it's criticizing them, you know, because we talk about, what I like about your work is that it really does talk about this artwork is in my home, not because it fits my couch, but because it's an art piece that engages me specifically as an art piece, right? Something maybe personal, something maybe a connection to the artist, maybe a love for the paint and its texture, things like that, that might be suffering because we don't understand the value of an art piece.
I mean, I don't know as I understand the value of an art piece. I've grown up around art pieces my whole life, and sometimes, you know, I see things now and out in the world, and I don't understand how people are valuing it. I might like it, but I don't know how anybody arrives at, you know, I mean, how a gallery is arriving at some of the prices that are being gotten. It's anybody's guess, you know, and I show in galleries, and I show, you know, I make art, I make different kinds of art, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that. And it's so much of it is a mystery that I don't, you know, and I think, you know, Philip Guston said it very well. He said, you know, I don't even want to engage with trying to figure out the mysteries here. Again, that is, I think, a huge problem. I'm not interested in the answers. I'm interested in the questions. The questions are going to keep me motivated. And as long as I have questions about what is it, what's curious about this, what am I doing, I feel lost, right? If I feel lost, I've got to get a roadmap. I've got to figure out how to get out of here, right? Well, you know, now nobody gets to be lost, right? Because we've got a GPS on our phone, right? We've got a computer in our pocket, right? When was the last time you got lost? Art is a unique experience where we can lose ourselves completely. There is no GPS, right? Art school attempts to be some GPS towards success, but it's a total sham in that way. There is no GPS if you are actually engaged in making something in the studio.
Beautiful.
And I think I'm much more interested in what that is than what some finished thing is, you know, and you know, that's.
So would you say then that maybe the art object and the regular object is that the art object, its value is it's less intrinsic?
I would say that the art,
that's what makes it more. So you can fluctuate in price, you can fluctuate in meaning, you can fluctuate in use, which makes this unique type of experience versus a shoe that has to fit, that has to serve its function outside. That
both are of service to the human being. The shoe, I mean, if we're going to go with shoes, you know, my feet would be wet and cold if I didn't have shoes getting here, right? It serves a purpose, right? Art, I think, if we're going to say art with a capital A or something, it is of service to the world and to humanity. It does something magical, not for everybody, right? But it can be of service to people, and there's no hierarchy. It can be of service to people who are rich, who are homeless, who are of from any place in the world, right? It's a universal language that is a part of a collective, and we see ourselves mirrored at times in it.
I agree, and I think that the species that came before Homo sapiens, 150,000 years before we even developed, were making graves and also making art. And it is intrinsic. I think it's just something that comes out of us and that has this value that's just sometimes unrecognizable, but it's there.
And I don't think that any of those people, hundreds of thousands of years ago were thinking, I'm making art. I think they were probably thinking, I am being of service to a spirit that moves me. I am being of service to this person who has passed by decorating their grave. I am being of service to, like James Hyde says, that art is a gift, and that's in its origin where it began, right? And that gift comes from that unconscious place into the conscious, into the physical world, right?
Beautiful.
Through the hands of the person making it.
Beautiful. So we got our last question, and what do you want the viewer to get out of the exhibit, and how has the reception of the work inspired you as the artist?
Well, first of all, this is your first show, so and I'm very excited to be the first show here in Philmont, New York, and so I just want people to come see the show. And I also want to mention that we've got an amazing painting by an artist, Michael Wetzel, up in the front. You said, hey, why don't you choose one artist who you'd like to show up on this wall? It's kind of the, artist choice wall. And so I chose Michael Wetzel, who I think is an incredible painter. And so come see his painting also. Don't just see my stuff. And then there's an area artist wall.
It's called Art from Areas.
Yeah, and come see that, and then come see my art and like it or don't like it, and see more art.
Beautiful. And so you see
in real life, not just on social media.
So you see yourself creating more installations, maybe sculptures.
I would really love to continue this idea of the wallpaper, and the next time I show a body of this work, to have formal wallpaper made out of these black and white objects and do a hanging like this, but maybe even more dense. And so that's been, the wonderful thing about doing a show here in this space, because it was so raw when we started, was that we could try something out. And I've been thinking about doing something like this for a long time. And so this gave me an opportunity to really stretch my idea and either succeed or fail in a very big way, but not to really focus on whether it was going to be a success or not. Just, hey, let's try this out. Again, operating without a roadmap, no GPS. Hey, we're going to hang the show. Let's try something else out. And I think it looks tremendous. I'm very excited by it. I love painting the walls, the colors. I remember early on, my father had painters paint his condo in Buffalo, New York, while he was in the hospital. He had his condo painted, and each of the walls was painted a different color. Mm-hmm. And we were like, and we were just hearing about it. We were like, oh my God, it's gonna be like a circus. And then he had red carpet put throughout the condo. And there are many things about art and art dealing and things like this that I did not agree with my father about. It's just, and that's a subject for a psychology podcast. But aesthetically, it was really amazing. The art took on this very interesting effect, and each wall was unique, and it made this very warm installation. And I thought, I've never really forgotten that. So to come around to something that I do very much agree with, and something that I took from him, was trying that out, seeing how that would look within this installation.
Beautiful. And Reed, I want to thank you so much.
Thanks,
you for
Jesus.
coming in for the podcast. Your exhibit has been amazing.
Hi, Mom.
We're here in Philmont, New York. Please come visit the exhibit, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jesus. Come on over to FREN Productions.
FREN Productions.